welcome back to Wild Mountain Lodge Wildlife Sanctuary here in Planet Zoo. Today is going to be a super fun build because today we are putting in our first animals. So up first is the Bison and Pronghorn American Prairie Habitat. I wanted to have this right here at the front of the zoo, right next to the lodge. That way the second story windows look out over the habitat, and I wanted it here to give a good idea of what the whole zoo is going to look like once it's finished. So the idea of this habitat is that our bison and our pronghorn are holdovers from the game farm days. They would have been here when we bought the property, and we wanted to get them out of their dingy little pens and into a nice big natural habitat where they can live out their best lives and our guests can observe them and their natural behaviors. I want to have as few visible fences as possible for this habitat and for the whole zoo. So for this, I'm using this pond here at the front as a barrier. I'm leaving the far bank steep so that the animals can't climb out on that side. The other side has a nice slope to it. Once I got the habitat gate in, getting the staff path connected up was kind of awkward. I didn't want to put the habitat gate on the more guest-facing side. I want it to be over on this side, kind of out of view. Going to have the large barn over here at some point, so I need to have the gate over there. I didn't really leave enough room for a path here at the front though, so I had to run it through the trees, but I couldn't connect it otherwise so that it wouldn't interfere with the big Thule meadow that we have over by the cabins. That's supposed to be like an ecologically sensitive area that we don't want to disturb, so I don't want to punch a path through there, even if it's going to be temporary. Wanted to get some animals in there, turn them loose, see what happens, see if they can escape anywhere. If you're using null barriers, you always want to check and make sure that you have a sufficient barrier built up that they can't run through it. So I did have a couple of escape points once, and particularly once I got the pronghorn in because they're a little bit smaller. Went ahead and plugged those up with rocks to get all the animals in, get some enrichment in for them. Even though I'm playing with welfare turned off, I still like to get everything as green as possible. So fix up the terrain a little bit. I use the dirt to cut trails through the grass because animals follow trails. They walk the same places again and again. It creates paths through the grass. It's not going to be even. They're going to wear down certain areas more. Wanted to put in a few rock formations here in the interior of the habitat just to break up the flatness of it a little bit and to add some more visual interest. Both the bison and the pronghorn don't like a lot of planting, so breaking up the habitat with rocks is a good way to kind of get around that. However, I'm going to be ignoring the plant requirements in this build completely. I just don't. They are ridiculous. They are just dumb. So I'm going to plant it up how I want it to be planted up, and that's just how it's going to be. So their plant requirement will probably be in the red, but we're playing with welfare turned off, so it's not actually going to affect anything. So I decided that because their habitat isn't super visible from the little guest path that we have right now, that I would try to put in a safari ride, the 4x4 safari ride. Thought it made sense to add it in, just kind of snake it through the habitat. Not thrilled with it. I just don't like the transport rides in Planet Zoo at all. Like, I don't know. They look kind of cheesy, and then, God, the controls for getting them laid in is just so annoying. I mean, I don't remember it being this bad in Planco, but here we are, and it's, I don't know. I eventually get it in, get the path, get the track all connected up, but we're stuck with this big, dark, visible path, and track, and it just looks terrible. Like, try to sink it in a little bit, try to get it to look a little bit better, but there isn't a whole lot we can do about this. I did find out that you don't actually have to have an airlock gate. The vehicle will just go through the fence. It's not super realistic. So went ahead, tried to get the the airlock gate in there. I never really tried to put in a drive-through habitat at any point, so found out the hard way. You have to put in the gate attached to the fence without the track there, so I had to delete a couple of sections of path, put the gate back in, make sure there's a flat enough section to snap the gate into, and then do that on the other side and get it connected back up. So once that's all in, get the track reconnected there, get it to auto-complete itself on both sides, get the track to go straight through the gate, line up as straight as possible. And once all that's in, go ahead and start trying to connect up the queue path and the exit path. Didn't want to be super cooperative. Like I said, I don't mess with transport rides very much. I am going to have at least one in this zoo, and then in my franchise zoo, I'm going to have the big gondola station that goes from the front of the zoo all the way to the very top. So I am going to get better at dealing with the transport rides. I just don't love them. I feel like they're just kind of lacking at this point. So we got the whole thing in, tested it, tried to change the track color to make it blend in just a little bit more. Change the color on the vehicle so it's not that kind of camo green that I'm not a huge fan of. Got rid of the grass under the station platform, but I left the grass over the top of the track. That way it kind of hides it a little bit more. And then I wanted to, on these couple of these sections where it seems like it's sticking out of the ground way too much, just to delete that section and go back into it and try and sink that up just barely under the ground to hide it. A null track or an invisible track of some sort for these transport rides would be so helpful. It would make these look so much better, particularly for the boat ride. I've tried to use the boat ride before. I've never gotten it to where I like it because that track is always visible under the water. So yeah, some sort of null track, and a null path for that matter too. Like a truly null path that has no railing and that is invisible when elevated would just be a feature that I would die for at this point. So I fight with the track for a little while, finally get it to something that I can kind of tolerate. I don't want it to dive too far into the ground because then the vehicle will sink into the ground as it goes over it. Get it to where it's not hugely visible though. But at this point, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that this is probably too invasive into the pronghorn habitat. The bison probably don't care because they're much more of a don't mess with me kind of animal. You know, every year seems like every year we read a story that comes across the internet of some person who went to Yellowstone and thought the bison were tame and tried to pet one and got launched 20 feet in the air because, as it turns out, yeah, they might be related to cattle. They're wild animals. They fight off grizzly bears and wolves. You are not a problem. Okay, I've completely forgotten my train of thought. Oh yes, the pronghorn. But the pronghorn are much more sensitive, much more shy. So at this point, I've taken a break. I've come back to it the next day and decided that no, the station isn't going to work. The 4x4 ride does not fit with the theme that we're going for in the zoo, in the sanctuary that we're trying to build. So get rid of it. Just got rid of it completely. Put in a wider guest path. So part of it is, one thing I forgot is that this whole park is supposed to be on a big loop. And if going to have a big loop, it's got to go around the bison and pronghorn habitat in some manner. So it's either going to go around the front or it's going to go around the back. And I really don't want it to go around the back. So at this point, decided get rid of the staff path, replace it with an 8-meter guest path. And I'm using the sandy dirt guest path I'm going to go through the whole zoo with that because I think it fits this feeling of nature, of being in some kind of park or national forest. You would see paths like this, paths that get used a lot. They're going to be lighter than the surrounding dirt, so it brings out that little bit of a visual pop. So starting to get in the planting around the edge of the habitat, and I always say this, habitat builds at least mine, look like utter just crap until I start getting the plants and the rocks and the trees in. That's where these habitats just come to life for me. And it's what I always tell people. If you're not satisfied with your habitat, you're not sure what's going on, rocks and trees, rocks and trees, rocks and plants. Fill it full. Especially if you're in Sandbox where you can ignore the animal's plant requirement, which is dumb. Do it. Just ignore it. Yeah, that one slider, that one bar is going to be red. I don't care. For me, I don't care. If I could do it more in franchise, I would. But in Sandbox, you can just run wild with creativity. And plus, some of the plants in this game, which I'm very glad they included, Frontier has classified entirely wrong, like the sagebrush, which I'm going to use a lot of in this habitat because if you've been to Yellowstone, if you've been on the National Bison Refuge, if you've been out to Nevada where the pronghorn are, they live in the sagebrush. They live in the sagebrush. These are sagebrush animals, especially the pronghorn. Planet Zoo, for some reason, Frontier has decided to classify sagebrush as desert only. And I get, their biome designations are kind of weird. Like, according to them, I live in the taiga. I do not live in the taiga. Taiga forest is like boreal Canada, like on the edge of the tundra, really far north. Technically it's a Mediterranean climate, but you could call us a temperate climate. It's fine. Sagebrush, my point, should be classified as grassland and taiga, and possibly temperate too. And it's not a true desert plant, even though it may be found in some desert-like areas. It's not a true grassland plant either. But for the game's plant classification system, would make much more sense. Sagebrush is really its own plant community. Get a drink of water there. It's its own plant community. It's prevalent in the Great Basin. We call the Great Basin the Sagebrush Sea because it is dominated by species of the sagebrush. And what are the denizens of the sagebrush sea? Well, the main one is the pronghorn. That's where they live. That's where they primarily live nowadays. So not being able to put in the plant that is so most closely associated with the pronghorn just drives me up the wall, which is probably why I don't use pronghorn in my franchise zoos very much, because I kind of, same thing with bison, they have a very low plant tolerance. I can't get the habitat to look the way I need it to look. So on that note, with this habitat, I'm lining this back fence in heavy timber, so lots of ponderosa pines, the black spruce, the Douglas fir, a couple of the giant cedars, because I want this habitat to look like a natural meadow on the edge of the forest, which is kind of where the pronghorn live. I've been lucky enough to see wild pronghorn here in California when I've been camping up on the northeastern corner of the state, which is the only place pronghorn are found in California now. They used to be found throughout the entire Central Valley, from Tehachapi down in the south all the way up to Siskiyou County, Oregon border. Well, they've been wiped out of the Central Valley completely, been replaced by cows and agriculture. They're only found in California in the sagebrush, on the Modoc Plateau, down in the Tahoe Basin. But where the pronghorn live, they're not always out in the open. Where I see them is at the edge, where the ponderosa pine forest and the sagebrush grasslands come together. Because out in the open, they're vulnerable. In the dense forests, they're vulnerable. In the edge, they can both hide and see. So they can hide from their predators, but they can also see them coming. Mountain lions are their biggest predator. Mountain lions are an ambush predator. They prefer the denser, darker forests. The pronghorn are on the edge. They can see them coming. But I digress. I'm not actually... I know I criticize them a lot, but no, I love this game. Like, if I didn't have something to bitch about, it wouldn't be any fun. So it's starting to come along quite nice at this point. At this point, I'm getting to the stage where I like what I've built, and I actually enjoy looking at it. Before it was like, oh no, this looks terrible and barren, but now it's getting to the point where I'm starting to really enjoy the build. I'm really getting into it. Decided to put in some custom signage here because, again, education is a huge It's a huge focus of this particular build, so lots of custom signage. I'm starting with this sign that I got off the workshop, using it as a base. And what I want to do is embed the animal education boards in it in a way that we have the some of the education. We need custom billboards in this game. We need custom billboards so badly, or ways to do custom signage, because if I could do custom signage, I could make something that you could literally read everything off of that, and I want to do that very badly. And I know there's mods that will kind of let you do that, but you have to replace something else to do it right now, and I'm just not too thrilled with that. Mostly because, and I've said before, I'm really ADD, and the reason that's a problem is I tend to forget stuff a lot. So if I replace a an education board with, say, with some custom signage, I will probably completely forget that I have done that. Once that particular build is done, I'll forget to remove it. And then if I go to use an education board for whatever animal I had to replace, well, that's a problem, because now I have to go find out how to uninstall the mod, and it's a little bit more of a headache than I want to get into right now. But there are some extraordinary mods up on the Nexus, and some animal mods too that are just fantastic. But again, right now at least we have to replace something else with that, and I probably just need to like get over it and start using them. But I don't know. I don't want to get over it. I'm particular about certain things, and I like that. But if we do ever get away, and apparently there's some talk in the modding community that that's coming along, to where we won't have to actually replace a prop or an animal to put in some custom stuff, I will be all over it, and I will be making my own mods. I can't wait for that. Like I used to mod Skyrim back in the day when it came out, and I did a whole bunch of new animals added in, like all sorts of things. I changed the wolf model to look better, changed the behavior so that they actually behave like wolves and not monsters. It was a ton of fun, and I want to do that again for Planet Zoo. There are so many animals that I want to make. It would be loads of fun. But hopefully that'll come down the road, or maybe Frontier will give us the Planet Zoo version of the Maker's Toolkit. Finally remembered and looked at my kind of master plan that I've drawn up for this. So we've got the signs directing people to different areas. It's starting to look great. Wanted to get in some education boards. I have a couple of different these conservation board blueprints here that I've made. I decided to go with a different one though, just because the ones that I currently had, or that I'd either made or found on the workshop, they just weren't quite right. So went ahead and made a custom one to kind of fit the theme of this zoo a little bit better. So just going with similar pieces that we've seen over and over again at this point. These painted beams from the South America pack are fast becoming my absolute favorite piece in the whole game. They work so well for this, and it's kind of it's almost like a National Park Service or Forest Service kind of feel to this build. I'm using kind of the similar colors. I brings up a lot of nostalgia for me, because we always went camping when I was a kid. You know, my mom was a single mom. She raised me. You know, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. So vacations, Disneyland, that didn't happen. Our vacations were going camping. And we live, fortunately, and we still do, close enough to the mountains that it's not a big undertaking to just take off for a couple of days up to, you know, some nearby campground and have a whole bunch of fun. So that was my whole summer growing up. It was just super fun. So building this stuff that kind of reminds me of, you know, the campground information boards. And if you've ever been to a Forest Service campground, you've seen them. They're always painted this kind of same dark color. It's just, I don't know, it's like a trip down memory lane. So that is, I think, why I'm going with this particular kind of rustic theme. So at this point, I decided we need more education in here. Even though we've got quite a bit, I wanted to do like a little education cabin. So right here, kind of at the edge, had this little bit of a dead space anyways, so I took out the trees, scooted our conservation boards down a little bit to make room. This is just a 3x3 cabin. It's built out in the same style that you've seen me build a whole bunch now. You know, New World vertical wood walls, which I don't know if anyone else has noticed this. The aquatic pack stained wood wall set that we've all been oohing and ahhing over. It's just a recolor of this one. It's literally this set made recolorable, which I don't know. It's kind of slightly lazy, I guess. Like, I mean, I'm not knocking the stained wood walls. I love them. They are so versatile, and this particular set, this Vertical New World wood, is the one set that I truly have always wanted to be recolorable, so that's fantastic. But the fact that we didn't get like a completely new set is, I don't know, it's fine. Frontier did an amazing amount of work on the aquatic pack, and it's very well done. But this is kind of like, I noticed that, hey, come on, guys. So the cabin's coming along, got the main structure built out, starting to get some planting put around the outside, and making sure that the interior is completely flat, because it is going to be completely pathed and walkable for the guests. So getting the path in. I was very lucky on the first try to actually get the path to line up properly. We used align to grid to make it, to fill the interior of the room without any gaps, and then changed it to the wood plank flooring, which fits very, very nicely. So I wanted to make this an actual education cabin, not just implied. So these are going to be large education boards that they're going to go along all the walls. They're going to have actual research facts written out in with our signs. So first up is our American bison. Latin name is bison. So that's nice and repetitive. And actually the plains bison, which are our bison that we have in the game, are their scientific name, bison. Their subspecies. So getting in the population timeline, the American bison, they are a Pleistocene holdover. So they evolved alongside the other megafauna of the last ice age, alongside the mammoths, the mastodons, the giant sloths. They survived where the other megafauna went extinct. Up until about 1800, there were somewhere around 60 million American bison in North America. By 1889, the population was down to 541. By the next year, 1900, they were down to 300. Of those 300 animals, wild animals left, a few were rounded up, sent to the Bronx Zoo. Others were corralled in Yellowstone at the Lamar Bison Ranch. And this breeding program was undertaken. It was really the first modern effort to save a species from extinction. And today, present day, we have about 1,500 wild, free-roaming bison in the United States. They have a few more herds in small herds in northern Mexico and in Canada. There's about another 13,000 bison that are considered wild, as in they're not managed, but they are confined by fences due to the grazing regulations, because bison compete with cattle. Ranchers don't want them grazing on their land. And then there's also an erroneous belief that bison spread a disease called brucellosis. Bison do not transmit brucellosis to cattle. It's never been documented happening. Elk, however, do transmit brucellosis to cattle. But the state of Montana in particular uses the brucellosis excuse to cull their bison population heavily every year. So another group of facts that I wanted to put in about the American bison is the connection with the Native American tribes. So the Plains Indians, the Lakota, the Crow, the Cheyenne, the Ojibwe, and that's just a few. Couldn't name them all because there's just too many. Their cultures were built around bison. It was their primary food source. It was the source of their tools. It was the source of their clothing. Everything. Their lives were built around the bison, around the seasonal bison hunts. They were such a source of just everything, including their spirituality, that during the Indian Wars of the late 1800s and into the early 1900s, the US government decided to wipe out the bison entirely in order to starve the Plains Indians onto reservations. So the slaughter of the bison was government sponsored and government funded. So, unfortunately, not all of our facts are fun facts. Some of them are rather depressing, including that one. But at this point, the cabin is coming along really nicely. We've got everything in here. And because we put in all those super depressing facts, let's have some actual fun facts about the bison. So, bison fun facts. We'll get that in. But that way, as you're going out the door, you feel maybe a little bit better. You turn around and you read this coming out. So, our first up, we have two species of bison in North America. So, the American bison consists of the plains bison, which are the ones that we have in Planet Zoo, and then the wood bison. The wood bison are larger and they're found in the more northerly part of their range, so northern Canada and into Alaska. The yak is actually the closest living relative of the bison. They are bovid, so they are a cattle relative, but they don't breed well with cattle, even though some attempts have been made and they've actually polluted the bison genome with cattle DNA. Unless a bison cattle hybrid is 7/8 bison or 7/8 cattle, they actually can't, they're actually not fertile. So, moving on from the bison, we're getting our pronghorn education in here. And our pronghorn, their Latin name is Attilocapra americana. So, we're getting that in for them. Their population timeline, it's a little bit more ambiguous than the bison. They're not as well documented. So prehistory, their prehistoric pre-1800 populations unknown, but they were very abundant. They were heavily documented by Lewis and Clark. Lewis and Clark were some of the first, at least English-speaking, white settlers to encounter them. They described them as goat-like and noted their resemblance to African antelopes, which is why they are mistakenly called antelope, even Planet Zoo mistakenly calls them antelope. Their name is not pronghorn antelope. They're pronghorn. The antelope portion is completely incorrect. They are entirely in their own family. Again, a Pleistocene holdover, so they are part of the megafauna. They evolved alongside their predator, which would have been the American cheetah, which went extinct. Their principal predators now are mountain lions, as we touched on. The adults aren't preyed upon too much by coyotes because they are so fast. They can outrun them, but the coyotes do prey heavily on the fawns. And then wolves also prey on the pronghorn, at least where their ranges overlap nowadays. They used to overlap pretty much completely, but wolf range in North America has been so severely cut back that they only overlap in parts of Wyoming and Yellowstone at this point. So then they put in another board on the principal threats to the pronghorn. The habitat fragmentation is the biggest threat right now. They are a migratory species, so they migrate yearly from their winter range to their summer range because they can't handle deep snow. So they come down from the higher elevations into the lower elevations. And one thing about pronghorn is they're very fast, but they can't jump well. So they can't get over fences very well. So they tend to try to go under them if possible. A lot of times you'll see them, they just get down on their bellies and shimmy under the fence. If they can't do that and they do try to jump it, they don't always make it over. Sometimes they'll get hung up, and if it's on barbed wire, they'll die. So habitat fragmentation, rangeland being broken up for cattle grazing is a big issue. What I'm putting in here is a map of Path of the Pronghorn, which is a pronghorn migration route that's been identified in Wyoming. The pronghorn migrate from their summer range in Grand Teton National Park, which is just south of Yellowstone, down to Pinedale, Wyoming. And it's been identified as their their principal migration route for that particular herd, which is one of the largest pronghorn herds in the country. And it's also being used as an example now of a cooperative effort between the federal land managers, the Park Service, the Forest Service, and private ventures, ranchers, mineral and gas extraction to manage this for the pronghorn in a way that doesn't disrupt private business. And it's really a good example of this cooperation that's actually becoming very effective. It's working out quite well. These land use agreements to manage the path of the pronghorn for pronghorn to not disrupt their migration route. So, putting in our pronghorn fun facts over here, they are the fastest land mammal in North America. They are the second fastest land mammal in the world. They top out at about 45 miles an hour. The cheetah is number one. So, land mammal, the fastest animal in the world is the peregrine falcon when it dives. But we got that in. Their closest living relatives are neither antelopes nor goats. They're actually more closely related to giraffes and okapis, which is kind of interesting. I did not actually know that. So they are in the superfamily that includes the giraffes, okapis, and then the pronghorn, and they are more distantly related to deer, and then the Bovidae family, which is the cattle, goats, sheep, and antelopes. So we're getting that finished out. We don't have much in this game that would work as like Native American decoration, and we don't have too much that we can actually build some out of. Hopefully if we get a North American pack, which I really, really, really hope is on the horizon. We desperately need it. With some North American animals, we get some Native American themed set pieces, scenery pieces. That would come in quite handy for a build like this. Tried even looking on the workshop. We don't even have much there. We do have a few nice totem pole pieces, but nothing that would quite fit this. So I did use some of these the East Asia baskets as kind of stand-ins for, Native American baskets, but that's about what we had. I don't want to go too cheesy on that because you see it can get very stereotypical. I hesitate to use the phrase Native American culture because that's really not a thing. There is no one unifying Native American culture. Every tribe had its own culture, has its own culture, the tribes that still exist, and they're all different. So I just hesitate to use that vast type of generalization. So I just wanted to get these staff buildings here, the keeper's hut and the small staff room, covered up in their own little building. And now that I have this one building built, I'll be able to just blueprint this and use it again in various parts of the zoo. Because the way I set up my staff work zones, and this is for franchise and Sandbox, because it works really well, every habitat has a keeper's hut and a staff room next to or very close to the gate. I might share them between a couple of habitats if they're small habitats, or between a habitat and a few exhibits. But I do this because this way the keeper never has to walk more than about 10 feet to actually do their job. And they'll actually do their job. As long as the work zone doesn't get disrupted if I move the gate or something and forget to fix it. But yeah, this is how I make my staff actually work. It's the keeper not feeding the animals. Just yeah, that shouldn't be a thing. That is not an okay thing at all. But getting the little staff facility planted up around the edges, just getting some of the details in, using those Planet Zoo windows again that are one of my favorite pieces for this. Just recolor them from that blue and white and they look really good. They fit this rustic feel really nicely. And this is complete at this point. Yeah, so super fun build. Really enjoyed it. I'm so glad I finally got some animals in here. I love how the bison pronghorn habitat turned out. Way over the plant requirements for both of them. I don't care. It looks great. So if you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed some of our bison and pronghorn facts, and I do apologize, but I will be throwing those facts like that at you for every habitat we build. So I apologize in advance if it kind of drags the people down or if I'm talking too much. But you know what? It's really fun. I was saying I need to learn to talk more, and I think I figured it out. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. If you want to be notified when I post a new video, hit the bell notification. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you in the next one.